Hi, I'm Bob Dixon. Welcome to the Leader's Edge Hot Takes edition of the Five Eagles Insight Podcast. For over 3 decades, I served in the military as an engineer and as a strategist, and I learned a few things about leadership. We know that it goes beyond theory. It's about real-world application. So in this series, sponsored by Five Eagles Leadership, we feature industry leaders and share their leadership journeys with you. My mission's simple. It's to help you become the best leader you can be. Now, if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to be considered as a guest in upcoming episodes, please go to 5eaglesleadership.com/interview and apply today. Now, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm Marisa McClure, and joining me today is John Quinn from Greenville, Texas. John is the co-founder and CEO of Exos Aerospace. Welcome, John. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you, Marisa. Great to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to dive right into some questions. So to get us started, give me a 90-second or so overview of your business and how you got into it.
All right. So Exos Aerospace, we're one of 3 in the United States that's actually licensed by the FAA to fly reusable rockets. And the team goes back about 25 years, starting with a millionaire's hobby of building everything from lunar landers for NASA to competing in the Google X Prize, or the Ansari X Prize. Taking round 1 on that with a lunar lander called Pixel, later going on to build Morpheus for NASA, putting people in rocket-powered racing planes, to building the first in a series of Stig reusable rockets. And I met one of these gentlemen at church, and I was building some Navy submarine technologies, and he said, "Oh, we could probably help with that." So I found myself working with rocket scientists to build Navy submarine tech, and when their founder put the company into what he called hibernation mode, I stepped in and said, "Oh, you guys can't stop. Let me call the guy who taught me how to trade stocks so I could fire my boss." So I called Mr. David Mitchell, and I said, "Hey, you need to come up to this airport." And he comes up and he looks around and he said, "Wow, this is like a museum of aerospace, and these guys can't stop. We should help them." And I said, "Yeah, I've been working on the business plan for about 3 months. It's in your inbox." And so about 10 years ago, Exos Aerospace was formed to continue on a commercial venture for reusable rockets. And I'll talk about some of the neat things that have happened since that vision started as we go through, I'm sure.
Yeah, wow. It's very, very interesting, very exciting. I love that you are doing some networking in church. You never know where your next lead is going to come from. That's great. Okay, so let's hear about, what do you think is the biggest problem in your industry, and how are you solving that for yourself, for your clients, or for your referral partners?
Wow. I'm not sure if it's the biggest problem or the biggest opportunity. I like to, have a half full glass here.
That's a great perspective. So, yes.
I think the biggest problem is entrenched, no accountability contracts that just go on and on forever by the big primes. That's one of our biggest problems, but it's also one of our biggest opportunities, because I believe that small flexible teams can do much like the big primes have their skunk works and things like that. We can operate much faster, and I think that's the big opportunity for us, is not only do we not have the bureaucratic burden of a huge company, but we also have the flexibility to leverage that, where we can move quickly, and honestly, we can put a fixed firm price contract out there to Department of Defense or to commercial space, and we're good enough to figure out what that budget's going to be, and we can actually get through it. on a fixed firm price contract instead of, oh yeah, it's going to be 2 years and $10 million, and it ends up being, 20 years and $50 billion. So that's the advantage we have, and I think that today we're seeing that the different commercial and government entities are recognizing those capabilities.
Yeah, that's great because that can be a very challenging environment to function in with, like you were saying, the bureaucracy of it and contracting and all of that. Yeah,
Yeah, and the
that's a
key
real
for
challenge.
us is, defense and commercial. Uh, our president, David Mitchell, teaches on a three-legged trading table, right? Fundamentals, technicals, and market tone. And I've kind of copied that to say, well, we also need three market segments that we serve. And for us, it's going to be commercial, NASA, defense, and those kind of give us those three legs because we started a program for a hypersonic reusable rocket for the Air Force 3.5 years ago. And 6 months ago, we finally put in for the follow on for that. So we spent 9 months building something, and then we spent 3 years to go to the next level with DoD. Well, if we didn't have commercial as well,
Gotcha.
and those markets and investors, we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found a way to keep it going. That's great. So
Yes,
tell us a
a
little
lot of
bit
dedicated
about kind
people.
of where you are now. I know you mentioned kind of a recent accomplishment, so let's hear about
Yeah,
that.
so a long-standing accomplishment. 3.5 years ago,
Okay.
we've reached out to some of our partners. Around the time COVID was hitting,
Okay.
we did a pivot. And we had flown our first rocket named Sarge 4 times. We did lose it on the fourth flight, and it was material fatigue. So when we got through our failure modes and effects analysis and root cause failure analysis, we got down to a metal fatigue issue in aluminum after 4 flights, and we decided that we would shift to carbon composites, perfectly aligned with a move to defense because we couldn't work anymore commercially because of COVID. We were
Oh,
shut down.
sure.
But if we were on a defense contract, we continued. And the guys kept coming into the office, and we shifted to a integrated pressurized carbon composite structure for our rocket. Far more durable than the aluminum, but also 7 times, 8 times more expensive, but reduced almost 30% of the weight of our rocket.
Wow.
So that was good and bad. Before
Yeah.
that, the Sarge rocket, we built 100% of it in-house, right? Great thing to vertical integration. You've got everything kind of in your control, and you can see all the moving parts, right? Well, this took 30% of that build out of our hands. So we acquired 10% of that company, Scorpius Space Launch Company, and they had patented technology for how to wind tanks and also on their resin system, which didn't have to be baked in an autoclave. So you build a tank today, most companies bake their tanks for days, and a lot of energy input that goes into that and a lot of time. And this company had done it with technology where they didn't have to do that. So they built our hypersonic reusable launch vehicle body and tank structures, and we bought 10% of the company with the right to buy the rest of the company if we could help them get that technology on the moon. So NASA's been asking for this for 30 years to
Oh,
be
wow.
able to have Type 5, which are linerless carbon composite tanks. And the reason that's so significant is our first rocket had a metal lined tank. And every 10 times we pressurized that, we had to do an inspection of that tank. Well, in tomorrow's space economy, we're going to fly rockets 10, 20, 50, 100 times. We're going to put things on orbit. We're going to refuel them dozens of times. Kind of hard to do an inspection in space. So,
Yeah.
on February 22nd of this year, those tanks landed on the moon on the Odysseus lunar lander by Intuitive Machines.
Wow.
Great NASA contract. And the follow on to that is this month, the end of this month, they have a launch window to put their second lunar lander on the moon.
Wow.
So super exciting development, and now, of
Yeah.
course, we've secured that right to buy the balance of the company. So back to 100% control over vertical integration in the build of our latest rocket and potentially much larger ones that DoD is asking for as well that also have commercial and research applications.
Wow, that is very exciting. Very cool.
It's amazing when, the Scorpius team, 15 people, uh, put a piece of hardware on the moon.
That's amazing.
Just,
Yeah. Wow.
just thinking of that when you compare it to, some of the other big known tank companies that are tens of thousands of people. And of course, they have more product offering lines, but they represent the only commercial company in the world that has built a Type 5 tank that's been proven in space and is sitting on the moon. So
Wow. Very cool.
just
What a great
astonishing what
accomplishment.
people
Yeah.
can do, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. So you've mentioned working both with commercial and with defense. So who would you say is your ideal client, and what are some of the major outcomes they can expect from working with you?
Yeah. So our ideal client is the one that gets behind the mission. Now, I love that we have multiple applications, but the thing that changes the world is the research that suborbital flight enables, or the research that a reusable rocket, even in the hypersonic realm, enables. And I'll take it to space first. On Earth, we've got drugs that we depend on in this society, but they're very limited because when you take a blood sample and you put it on that slide, it's now compressed at 14.7 psi because it has atmospheric pressure on it. In your body, it's nice and round, but as soon as I pull it out and I go to analyze it, it's a flat cell being compressed. Doesn't react the same. But if I could do that in space, where I needed to introduce a curing agent into one of your cells, well, it's round just like it is in your body.
Wow.
So now I can do much more effective science in space. Now, most of those things don't happen in 2 or 3 minutes that we're in space in microgravity, but with the International Space Station shutting down in just a few years, we're in a perfect place to kind of make that transition to a new space station and kind of expand on that suborbital research before putting something on orbit that may or may not work. And, Elon Musk has done a phenomenal job getting things into space, but when I see 60 research satellites kicked out and, 30% of them fail, it just made a bunch of space junk. And the people who put those satellites up, universities in this case, didn't learn anything except they failed, right? What if I had flown that to space, put it in the microgravity, brought it back and handed it to them? They might have been able to go back and say, oh, this 13% capacitor failed because it wasn't rated for the vacuum of space. We fixed that, and now we've got our $125,000 satellite back, and it only cost us, $20,000 to put it on that test. Now you've advanced humanity and the capabilities that we can leverage through research and development. And I've gone on, so I'll wait on the hypersonic one and throw that in another question.
Okay. What makes you and your company unique? What is it that you can offer to help your clients achieve the outcomes they're looking for?
Yeah, so I've got to point to the team. Absolutely phenomenal group. They've been doing this for 25 years. The guy who designs it goes out and I'll tell you our rocket engine story on our Sarge vehicle. We went out, David Mitchell and myself funded the first year and a half, and then we went out and we got some investors, mostly friends and family, and we funded the build of that first rocket. And I said, okay guys, we've got 90 days. We need 3 rocket engines. And I budgeted to build 3 of these. So you got a week to design a rocket engine, a week to build it, a week to test it, and a week to iterate.
Mm.
And we built our first engine, and it didn't hit our performance numbers. We built our second engine, and it wasn't as stable as the first, so we learned something. We built our third engine, and it was what flies our rockets today. So in 90 days, we built 3 complete rocket engines, went through design, build, iterate, and test. But how I get back to our people, the guy who designed it went out and machined it on the machine.
Mm.
And then he assembled the engine, and they welded it all together, and then they tested it, and then we put it out on the rocket engine test sled, and we fired it, and they measured all the performance, and they said, well, it's not quite what we want. They iterated, and then they're back in a week of design, build, iterate, test, and in 90 days we went through that cycle 3 times, and we had a hit for our engine. And flash forward 3 or 4 years later, that first engine we made was perfect for another application.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up selling that engine to a space company who wanted to fly a space plane, but this engine would run at 20% throttle just as happy as 100%, and that's what they needed. So kind of fit perfect. We ended up creating a product accidentally, right?
Yeah, happy accident. Yeah.
So it's like, well, this engine performs really great in high turn down conditions where you want to back down the throttles, and it's like you have kind of an infinite range from 20% capability to 100. That isn't around today because most rockets and missiles are fired by solid engines that just kind of go 0 to 100 miles an hour in a second. And sometimes you want to go 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and kind of ramp up so that you don't have the shock on the payload. So we definitely have the capability to do that.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking, when you're developing new technologies, you probably deal with a lot of setbacks along the way, whether it's just with the development of the technology itself or getting the investors or whatever. So how did you keep your team, focused and motivated when you were facing a lot of those different setbacks? Or were they self-motivated?
Oh my goodness, my guys are so self-motivated. I mean, they're owners in the company.
Okay.
So they have, those periods where the investment didn't come in fast enough. They're saying, oh, well, okay, I'm going to go manufacture something else on our equipment in the shop to subsidize my own salary while we're waiting to get the capital funding. We need to go on to the next step.
That's
So
great. Yeah.
just pivot and move on quickly. And, our guys have tested engines that a NASA engineer has worked on for a couple of years and then looked at it and said, yeah, it's going to fail. Because of this, it's not going to work. And, we put it on the test stand for them, and 100 milliseconds in, the engine is gone. It's eaten itself. And they're like, well, we kind of saw that, but that engineer went back to NASA and he redesigned it in a week.
Wow.
And he's designing engines now, and he's got a different philosophy. And so even our little team is impacting what's happening at NASA. And just like the next great thing that Elon does with a heat shield or whatever else will proliferate throughout the industry and raise all ships. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way it's a great thing to remember that when you have those failures, they're always going to lead you to something else, and you can use them as lessons learned. You can use them to help you grow and move forward. And so, it's not a bad thing. So we'll talk more about failures in a minute, because I'm going to ask you about any that you've experienced. But first, where do you see your industry going in the next 5 to 10 years, and how are you staying on top of that?
Yeah, so I see the industry doing a bit of a shift. Right now, we have 90%, 95%, I don't know the real number, of payloads going to space lofted by SpaceX, right? However, those ride-share missions are putting a satellite where that Falcon 9 is going. Now, if it takes a week to get to your destination, that's okay, but what happens when it takes 6 months to go from where you're dropped off to where you need to be?
Mm.
And that's where I see the next shift, and believe we'll be part of that because we have LOX methane tank technology that completely beats hydrazine, which is kind of the fuel of choice today. I personally have friends in the Air Force who aren't in the Air Force anymore because they were loading hydrazine modules up into the auxiliary power unit and had it leak on them.
Mm.
It is nasty. It's nasty to manufacture. It's a phenomenal propellant, but liquid oxygen and methane are about 20% more efficient.
Mm.
So they get you there faster,
Okay.
and they could potentially keep you in orbit for on a 4 or 5 year life of a satellite another year. What's the value of that? What's the value of $1 million a month data earning satellite taking
Mm-hmm.
6 months to get to where it can start earning money?
Mm.
What if I could put it there in a few days using these LOX methane technologies because they're more efficient? And I think that's where we'll
Yeah.
see a shift.
Okay.
We'll have many companies coming out of the woodwork starting to build integrated pressurized structures the way we do. Because we don't just build a tank, we build a tank and the structure is one piece.
Mm.
And that means the tank is lighter, that means the structure is lighter, but
Mm-hmm.
together, combined as a single piece, they're lighter. And when you're putting something in space, lighter means faster, means less costly for the flight, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. And I think you'll see that uh, the focus will be not on competing necessarily with SpaceX and Blue Origin and ULA, but augmenting the services
Mm-hmm.
and what we can do today with their platforms through these more efficient methods that are good for the environment and also make an ROI look much healthier than you would see today.
Yeah. Sounds great. Moving in a good direction. Okay. So back to failures. So what would you say was your biggest failure or challenge up to this point, and how does that shape the way that you do business?
Yeah, so, almost every failure from an equipment standpoint is a success as long as we captured the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see those things as failures unless it took us too long. If we took a month doing something that we could have built 3 pieces of hardware instead of one
Mm.
and blew up 2 of them, I would be much happier with that
Mm-hmm.
because we learned quickly when we do iteration. And
Yeah.
I believe that that is the future of how space advances. And Elon has come out in spades and shown us how that does work.
Mm-hmm.
But the U.S. Navy did it on submarines 50 years ago. So I kind of give them the credit because we did iteration and testing and destructive testing and to the nth degree.
Mm.
So now the real failure, I would say, for me as a leader was not engaging the sales process earlier than I did
Mm.
and focusing more on that early on.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, probably some real good lessons learned, and I've read some great books that say, yeah, that probably would have made a difference back then. But that's how we all learn, right? Over
That's
time.
right. It's important to have those experiences because that gets us to, grow and move forward and do better. I always say that I acknowledge my mistakes, I take responsibility and accountability for them, and then I use them as the lesson learned. And I try not to make the same mistake again, but knowing full well I am going to make more mistakes, right? Because we all do. That's the way life works. And so
Yeah, isn't it awesome when we can learn from someone else's mistakes? That
that
just
is
usually
helpful.
isn't that strong a teacher.
And some of us are a little stubborn and think that, well, that won't happen to me. So you have to be,
Yeah.
I think, self aware enough to know that, okay, I can learn from this person's mistake because I can see myself getting into that same situation. But I think it's a learning experience to get to where you can use other people's experiences as lessons learned because, yeah, we do have a tendency to think that, oh, that won't, that won't happen to me. I won't have that problem. So
Yeah, and then you've got conflicting messages like Field of Dreams, where build it and they will come. Yeah, that's not the best business principle, right? But it's a great movie.
no, you might need to be a little more proactive. Yeah, for sure. All right. So what is your next area of growth? I mean, you've accomplished so much. What's next
Yeah.
for you, either professionally with the business or just for you professionally?
Yeah, for the business, completing the acquisition of Scorpius Space Launch
Mm-hmm.
is a big one for us.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, we've got a couple of contracts that we're waiting on. We've submitted to Department of Defense on that will
Okay.
also change the industry. And rotating detonation rocket engines
Mm.
have such phenomenal potential. Uh, it changes, it doesn't change the equation of how to get off of Earth, but boy, it makes it a whole lot more efficient.
Mm.
So, hypersonics, scramjets, rotating detonation rocket engines, all coming together will allow us to get back to where we were 30 years ago when we had the Concorde and we were flying at Mach 2 plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mach 1.8. But today we'll have the capability to take our hypersonic reusable launch vehicle, fly it on a trajectory, and figure out that if I fly Mach 2.4, I can use this dollar per square inch material. But if I want to push it up to flying at Mach 3, that same inch of material is going to cost me $1,000.
Mm.
And back when Concorde was built, they didn't have that capability. They were building it, right?
Mm.
So to be able to test materials and new things that are being developed much with AI support, we're in a hyper growth scale where it's no longer linear progression and advancement of technologies that we use every day. And then as a company, we have to understand how to be really selective in picking that next technology we're going to adopt to leapfrog us forward before the competition catches up with the last great thing we did.
Leading the way. Love it.
So,
Sounds great.
and I've got the right team behind me to get it done.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. It's all about the people, right? Even though you're so technology focused, it still comes down to the quality of the people that you have, working on your team.
And, I look at Marcus Rufer leading Scorpius Space Launch out in California, building the tanks that are sitting on the moon. And I look at that team, and it is totally diverse culturally. But then, a gentleman works there, and his brother works there, and his son works there. And, those skill sets are being passed down even in families. And in Japan, they're phenomenal at passing down legacy capability. We're not so good at it at the US, but it's very encouraging to see small companies that have embraced that and still implement that and pass those capabilities down because
Yeah.
that second generation comes up with new ideas that change tomorrow.
Yep, that's great. All right, love that. Okay, so last question. How do people contact you if they want to work with you or learn more about what you're doing or maybe discuss a referral partnership or something like that? How do people reach you?
Yeah, so www.exosaero.com puts you on our website. There is an info tab there. So
Okay.
info@exosaero.com. They can reach out to us. We do have some postings out there for opportunities job-wise, but for business opportunities, for those people doing orbital transfer or the companies who are trying to clean up space and put tugs out there, that's where we're going to make a difference is building those satellites and those space tugs as an integrated pressurized structure rather than, building something, putting tanks in it. And, I went out and looked at the Launcher One when Virgin Orbit was going through bankruptcy. And that vehicle had 70,000 parts. And I look at our rocket, and we've got about 700 parts.
Wow.
And part of that is integrated pressurized structure, you don't have to have 100 brackets when your tank has outgrowths that support your wiring, that connects the outer structure. And all this becomes one component, and it's kind of a unibody build. And that makes things stronger, lighter, faster, cheaper. And again, I'm not trying to put 70,000 pieces together. I'm putting 700 together with a team of half a dozen people.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I can now wrap my brain around, I've got 100 pieces to put on the rocket, right? As opposed to I've got 10,000 pieces to put on the
Right.
rocket.
Yeah. A lot smaller margin for error there when you're keeping that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thanks so much for being here. All this is so fascinating to me, and I look forward to kind of keeping an eye on how your business continues to grow and lead in this space. So
Well, thank you,
congrats on all
Marissa.
your accomplishments so far, and good luck.
Great questions. Keep them coming and keep doing what you're doing, because it's great to have the insight as you're informing people in the industry about what's out there.
Yeah, no, we really enjoy that. And I also want to say thank you for your service as a fellow Navy veteran. So
Yeah,
go
for
Navy.
you as well.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and take care.
Good day.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Leader's Edge Hot Take Series. I hope you found today's insight meaningful, valuable, and that you're ready to put them into action. Now, if you enjoyed the episode and want to keep improving your leaderships, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I post new content every week, packed with strategies, tips, and real-life examples to help you lead with impact. Now remember, great leadership isn't just about guiding others, it's about continuously growing yourself. If you'd like to be considered as a guest for upcoming episodes, please go to 5eaglesleadership.com/interview to apply today. Keep pushing, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next episode. Be awesome.